Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the mining station corridor, trying to make himself invisible as the Vorthak security patrol stomped past. Their chittering conversation carried the usual mix of contempt and amusement that all the alien species seemed to share when discussing humans. "The beast-talking monkey is at it again," clicked Officer Zeth, his mandibles clacking with what passed for laughter among his insectoid kind. "Claims he can understand the Drakmori thoughts. Claims. Ridiculous," buzzed his partner Yix. "Humans lack even basic telepathic sensitivity. They're good for heavy lifting and dangerous work, nothing more." Marcus waited until their footsteps faded before letting out a shaky breath. At 17 standard years, he had spent most of his life on Kepler 442c, working the deep mines alongside his father. The planet was rich in quantum crystals, materials essential for faster-than-light travel, but it was also home to the Drakmori massive dragon-like creatures that the galactic community had classified as semi-intelligent fauna. The boy had always known he was different. Where other humans saw dangerous beasts to be avoided, Marcus heard whispers in his mind. Gentle, ancient voices that spoke not in words, but in emotions, images, and concepts that felt more real than reality itself. The Drakmori weren't just semi-intelligent, they were brilliant, wise, and deeply sad. "Marcus!" His father's voice echoed down the corridor. Jake Chen appeared around the corner, his mining gear still covered in crystal dust. "There you are. We need to talk." They walked together toward their small family quarters, past the segregated human housing that sat in the shadow of the alien administrative towers. Jake's expression was troubled, more so than usual after a day in the dangerous deep tunnels. "Son, I heard about what happened in the observation deck today," Jake said quietly, as they entered their modest two-room home. "About what you said to Director Vex." Marcus felt his stomach drop. During the daily species interaction period, a mandatory cultural exchange that was really just an opportunity for the various alien species to demonstrate their superiority over humans, he had made a mistake. When Director Vex, a pompous Zilithian with purple-scaled skin and golden eyes, had made another joke about human mental limitations, Marcus had snapped. "I told him the Drakmori aren't just animals," Marcus said, sitting heavily on his narrow bunk. "I told him they're trying to warn us about something. The deep crystals we're mining. The Drakmori are afraid of what we're doing." Jake rubbed his weathered face with calloused hands. "Marcus, you can't keep saying these things. The aliens already think we're nothing more than useful manual labor. If they start thinking, we're delusional too." "But Dad, I'm not delusional." Marcus's voice cracked with frustration. "I know how it sounds, but I can hear them. When we blasted through the lower cavern wall last week, the Drakmori in the area were screaming. Not with their voices, with their minds. They're terrified of something deep in the planet's core." His father sat down beside him, the weight of years of second-class citizenship visible in every line of his face. Humans had discovered faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago, making them the newest and least respected member of the Galactic Cooperative. Their lack of telepathic ability, their short lifespans, and their perceived emotional instability had relegated them to dangerous jobs on frontier worlds. "Even if that's true," Jake said gently, "no one will believe you. Dr. Zirian has been studying the Drakmori for 10 years. She's published papers on their neurology. According to her research, their brain structure can't support complex thought patterns." Marcus had met Dr. Zirian, a tall, ethereal luminary with translucent skin and silver eyes. Like most of her species, she possessed powerful telepathic abilities and considered herself an expert on all forms of consciousness. The idea that a human, a species barely capable of basic emotional projection, could perceive something she couldn't was laughable to her. "Dr. Zarian is wrong," Marcus said quietly. "The Drakmori don't think like we do, or like the other species. Their consciousness is deeper, older. It's like trying to hear a whale song when everyone else is listening for bird calls." The next morning brought news that made Marcus's stomach churn with dread. Director Vex had approved an expansion of the deep mining operation. They would be blasting through the planetary crust into areas that had never been disturbed, chasing a massive crystal formation that the geological surveys had detected. Marcus stood in the observation deck, watching the mining shuttles descend toward the planet's surface. Through the reinforced transparisteel, he could see the Drachmori in the distance. They were magnificent creatures, easily 30 feet long, with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Their wings, when spread, could block out the sun. Most of the time, they were peaceful, content to soar through the planet's amber skies or rest on the crystal formations that jutted from the surface. But today, they were agitated. Marcus could feel their distress like a constant ache in his chest. They circled the mining sites, their scales flickering between deep purple and angry red. To everyone else, it looked like typical animal behavior. Perhaps they were annoyed by the noise and vibrations of the mining equipment. Marcus knew better. They were terrified. Fascinating, isn't it? Dr. Zirion appeared beside him, her voice carrying the musical quality common to her species. The creatures seemed to be exhibiting increased territorial behavior. It's quite natural, they're simply responding to changes in their environment with basic survival instincts. They're not being territorial, Marcus said before he could stop himself. They're trying to warn us. The deep crystals aren't just resources, they're structural, like support beams. If we take too many from the deep core, something bad will happen. Dr. Zirion's silver eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Young, human. I appreciate your imagination. But these creatures possess neural pathways barely more complex than your Earth reptiles. They cannot conceptualize structural engineering or planetary geology. You're anthropomorphizing, projecting human thoughts onto animal behavior. Before Marcus could respond, Director Vex's voice boomed over the station's communication system. All personnel to observation stations. We are commencing the deep core extraction procedure. This operation will yield enough quantum crystals to power 3 star destroyers. The mining ships disappeared beneath the planet's surface, their energy drills boring deeper than any previous operation. Marcus pressed his hands against the transparisteel. Watching the Drachmori's behavior become increasingly frantic, their mental voices rose to a crescendo of fear and urgency that made his head pound. Please, he whispered. Though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the Drachmori, the mining crews, or the universe itself. Something's wrong. They're trying to tell us something's wrong. The first tremor shook the station 3 hours later. It was minor, barely enough to rattle the equipment, but Marcus saw how the Drachmori reacted. They stopped their agitated circling and began to fly away from the mining sites, their wings beating desperately as they sought distance from whatever was coming. Seismic activity is within normal parameters for deep core drilling, announced the station's AI in its emotionless voice. All operations proceeding as scheduled. Marcus watched helplessly as the mining continued. The tremors grew stronger. The Drachmori's terror reached a fever pitch, their mental screaming so loud that Marcus had to grip the walls to stay upright. Still, no one listened. No one believed that a human boy could understand what millennia-old dragon minds were trying to communicate. The second day brought stronger quakes and a discovery that changed everything. The deep core drill teams had broken through into a massive underground cavern, one that wasn't supposed to exist according to their geological surveys. The cavern was filled with a strange energy that made their instruments go haywire, and their quantum crystal detectors sing with unprecedented readings. It's incredible, Director Vex announced to the assembled station personnel. The cavern contains more quantum crystals than we've ever seen in one place. We could power the entire frontier fleet with this find. Marcus stood among the crowd of aliens and humans, feeling sick. The Drachmori had gone silent, not physically silent, but mentally. Their terrified screaming had stopped, replaced by something worse, a deep, resigned sadness that felt like watching the universe end. Sir, called out Lieutenant Torres, one of the human mining supervisors. The drill teams are reporting unusual energy readings. The quantum fields down there are unstable. Maybe we should... Nonsense. Director Vex cut him off with a dismissive wave of his scaled hand. Some field fluctuation is normal when dealing with deposits of this magnitude. We proceed as planned. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The Drachmori's sadness had infected his dreams, filling them with images he didn't understand. He saw the planet as it had been millions of years ago, when the Drachmori were young and their civilization flourished. He saw great crystalline cities that sang with harmonic energy, powered by the careful cultivation of quantum crystals that grew in perfect balance with the planet's core. He saw the disaster that came when that balance was broken. Marcus bolted upright, sweat covering his face. The vision hadn't been a dream, it had been a memory. The Drachmori's memory, shared with him across the telepathic link he was only beginning to understand. They had tried to warn their own people once, long ago, about the danger of taking too much from the planet's heart. They had failed then, and their civilization had paid the ultimate price. Now history was about to repeat itself, and once again, no one was listening to their warnings. The mining operation entered its third day with unprecedented success. The extraction teams had pulled more quantum crystals from the deep cavern than the station's storage facilities could handle. Ship after ship launched toward the galactic core worlds, carrying their precious cargo to fuel the ever-expanding civilization that spanned the stars. Marcus spent those days trying desperately to get anyone to listen to him. He approached Dr. Zerion with his growing understanding of Drachmori consciousness, only to be dismissed as a delusional child. He tried to explain to Director Vex that the energy readings weren't normal, but was told that humans lacked the scientific background to interpret such data. Even his fellow humans looked at him with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Claims of animal telepathy made their entire species look more primitive in the eyes of their alien colleagues. The boy found himself spending more time in the observation deck, watching the Drachmori through the transparent steel. Their behavior had changed dramatically over the past few days. Where once they had been frantic with warning, now they simply waited. They perched on the remaining crystal formations like living statues, their ancient eyes fixed on the mining sites below. On the evening of the fourth day, something unprecedented happened. Marcus was alone in the observation deck when he felt a presence touch his mind with unprecedented clarity. Not the emotional impressions he was used to receiving, but actual communication. Words formed in his consciousness, not in any language he knew, but in concepts that his brain somehow translated into meaning. Asterisk, young speaker of minds. Asterisk, came the voice. Ancient and vast as a mountain. Asterisk. The time of choice approaches. Your people's hunger will wake the deep fire. When it rises, all will burn your kind. Ours, all who walk between the stars. Asterisk. Marcus pressed both hands against the transparent steel, his breath fogging the surface. Outside, the largest Drachmori he had ever seen hovered in the amber twilight, its massive wings keeping it steady against the evening wind. Its scales had shifted to a deep gold color that seemed to glow from within. Asterisk. You are the bridge builder. Asterisk. The voice continued. Asterisk. The one who hears across the void of understanding. When the deep fire wakes, you must choose, save your people, or save the galaxy. You cannot do both. Asterisk. What do you mean? Marcus whispered aloud, though he knew the creature would hear his thoughts more clearly than his voice. What's going to happen? Images flooded his mind. The planet's core, destabilized by the massive quantum crystal extraction, beginning to collapse. The resulting chain reaction that would tear through the quantum field matrix that held local space-time together. The destruction spreading outward in an ever-expanding wave that would consume star system after star system, fed by every quantum crystal-powered ship and station in its path. The vision showed him the choice he would face. Warn the humans in time for them to evacuate, or find a way to contain the disaster that would cost human lives but save countless alien civilizations. The Drachmori had shown him this future not because they expected him to choose their way, but because they respected his unique position as the only being capable of understanding both sides. Asterisk. The deep fire stirs. Asterisk. The ancient voice whispered, as the great dragon turned away. Asterisk. Tomorrow, the choice becomes real. Asterisk. As Marcus watched the massive creature disappear into the gathering darkness, the station's sensors registered the first signs of what would soon become a planetary catastrophe. Deep beneath the surface, in the ransacked caverns where quantum crystals had been torn from their ancient matrix, something vast and terrible, was beginning to wake. The first crack in reality appeared at 0347 station time. Marcus had been awake for hours, pacing his small quarters while his father slept fitfully in the next bunk. The boy's head buzzed with the constant whisper of Drakmori, voices dozens of them now, all sharing the same urgent message. The deep fire was stirring. The quantum matrix that held space-time stable around the planet was beginning to fray like an old rope under too much weight. When the alarm klaxons started wailing, Marcus was already pulling on his clothes. What's happening? Jake Chen sat up, instantly alert despite being pulled from deep sleep. Years of dangerous mining work had taught him to wake ready for crisis. It's starting, Marcus said grimly, sealing his thermal suit. Dad, we need to get to the command center. They're going to need help. Even if they don't know it yet. The corridors of the mining station buzzed with confused activity. Aliens and humans rushed toward emergency stations, their faces reflecting the same mixture of alarm and bewilderment. The station's AI continued its emotionless announcements. Spatial distortion detected in Sector 7. All personnel maintain safe distance from external viewports. This is not a drill. Marcus and his father reached the main command center just as Director Vex was receiving reports from the deep mining teams. The Zilithians' usually perfect composure showed cracks of genuine concern as data flowed across the holographic displays. Report, Lieutenant Korvash, Vex ordered, his scaled fingers drumming against the command console. The Vorthak officer's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, the quantum field generators in the deep caverns have gone offline. We're reading massive energy fluctuations from the extraction site. The local space-time metric is unstable. Dr. Zirian stepped forward, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. That's impossible. Quantum fields don't spontaneously destabilize. There must be equipment malfunction. No malfunction, came a gravelly voice from the communications panel. Captain Thorne, the grizzled human who led the deepest mining teams, sounded shaken. I've been working crystal mines for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The quantum crystals down here aren't just glowing, they're singing. And the cavern walls, they're moving. Marcus felt a familiar presence touch his mind. The ancient Drakmori's voice carried new urgency. Asterisk. The deep fire tastes freedom. Your people have taken the crystals that bound it. Soon it will break free and consume all. Asterisk. Director Vex, Marcus called out, stepping forward from the crowd of observers. Sir, you need to evacuate the deep teams immediately. The quantum extraction has destabilized something that shouldn't be disturbed. Every alien head in the command center turned toward him. The silence that followed was thick with condescension and disbelief. Young human, Director Vex said slowly, his voice dripping with patronizing patience. This is a sophisticated mining operation requiring years of scientific training to understand. I appreciate your concern, but please leave the analysis to qualified personnel. Sir, with respect, I know what's happening down there. Marcus insisted, ignoring the embarrassed look his father was giving him. The Drakmori tried to warn us. The quantum crystals aren't just resources, they're part of a containment matrix. Something's been locked away in the planet's core for millions of years. And we just broke its prison. Doctor. Zirion's musical laugh tinkled through the command center. The boy claims the local fauna predicted a quantum cascade failure. How delightfully primitive. Perhaps next he'll tell us that reading animal entrails can predict warp drive malfunctions. The assembled aliens chittered, buzzed, and clicked with what passed for laughter among their species. Even some of the humans shifted uncomfortably, distancing themselves from Marcus's wild claims. That's when the second crack appeared. This time it was visible, a jagged line of absolute blackness that split the air near the main viewport. Through it, impossible colors bled like oil on water. The station's gravity fluctuated, making everyone grab for handholds, as loose objects began to orbit each other in defiance of physics. What in the seven hells? Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comm, filled with terror. The cavern's tearing open. There's something down here, something big and made of fire, and the transmission cut to static. Director Vex's composure finally cracked. All teams, evacuate the deep levels immediately. Dr. Zerion, I need analysis of that spatial distortion. Security, seal the lower access tunnels. And someone get me a connection to the Galactic Emergency Response Network. Quote, but Marcus was no longer paying attention to the chaos in the command center. His consciousness had been pulled into contact with the collective mind of the Drachmori, and through their ancient memories, he could see what was happening in the planet's depths. The creature that had been imprisoned beneath Kepler 442c was older than human civilization. Older than most of the species that now dominated the galaxy. It was a being of pure quantum fire, a cosmic force that had once consumed entire star systems before the Drachmori's ancestors had found a way to contain it. They had built a crystalline prison deep in the planet's core, using quantum crystals as both bars and chains to hold something that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Now those crystals were gone, shipped off to power the Galactic Cooperative's endless expansion. The prison was failing, and the quantum fire entity was beginning to wake from its million-year sleep. Asterisk, speaker of minds. Asterisk came the ancient voice, now joined by dozens of others. Asterisk, the choice time is here. We can still contain the deep fire, but the cost will be great. Your people in the deep places will not survive the binding. Asterisk. Marcus snapped back to present awareness to find his father shaking him by the shoulders. Marcus, you went completely still. What's happening to you? Before Marcus could answer, the lights in the command center flickered and died. Emergency illumination bathed everything in hellish red as more cracks appeared in the air around them. Through the largest fissure, something vast and burning was becoming visible, a presence so alien and terrible that several of the command crew fell to their knees, overwhelmed by its otherworldly nature. It's loose, Marcus whispered, then raised his voice over the growing alarms. Everyone needs to get away from the planet's surface. The entity down there exists partially outside our dimension. When it fully manifests, it'll tear through space-time like paper. Enough! Director Vex's voice cracked with panic and authority. Security, remove this human from the command center. His ravings are causing disruption at a critical time. 2 Vorthak guards moved toward Marcus, but stopped when the station lurched violently to one side. Through the main viewport, they could see the planet's surface beginning to buckle and crack. Fissures of impossible light spread outward from the mining sites, like a spider web of cosmic fire. That's when the first Drachmori spoke. The massive ancient creature that had communicated with Marcus the night before rose up from the planet's surface. Its wings spread wide enough to shadow the mining complex below. But it wasn't alone. Dozens of other Drachmori emerged from caves and crystal formations where they had been hiding, their scales blazing with harmonized light. And then, to the absolute shock of everyone in the command center, they began to sing. It wasn't a sound that physical ears could hear. The song resonated directly through the quantum field matrix, a harmony so perfect and powerful that it made the air itself vibrate. The spatial cracks that had been spreading across the station began to seal themselves, as if reality was being rewoven by pure music. Impossible, Dr. Zerion breathed, her silver eyes fixed on the displays showing quantum field readings. The local fauna is generating controlled quantum harmonics, but that would require understanding of theoretical physics beyond most spacefaring civilizations. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as the full beauty and sadness of the Drachmori's song filled his mind. They were offering themselves as living amplifiers, using their very life essence to strengthen the quantum prison that held the cosmic entity. But he could feel the cost each note of their song burned away years of their ancient lives. Asterisk. We sing the deep fire back to sleep. Asterisk, the ancient voice whispered in his mind, now strained with effort. Asterisk, but the prison crystals are gone. We must become the new bindings, the living chains. Most of us will not survive the song's ending. Asterisk. No, Marcus said aloud, causing every head in the command center to turn toward him. There has to be another way. The crystals they took, most of them are still on the station, waiting for transport ships. What if we put them back? Put them back? Director Vex stared at him, as if he'd suggested breathing vacuum. Those crystals are worth more than entire planets. The Galactic Core Assembly will have our heads, if we... His protest was cut short by another massive shudder that sent equipment crashing to the floor. Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the emergency channels. Mayday! Mayday! Deep Mining Station 7 is gone. Something came up out of the ground. Something made of fire and night. It's heading for the main complex. Through the viewport, they could see a pillar of quantum flame rising from the planet's surface. It twisted and writhed like a living thing. And wherever it touched, reality bent and warped. The Drakmori's song grew more desperate, their harmonics straining to contain something that was never meant to exist in their dimension. The storage bay, Marcus shouted over the growing chaos. We have to get the quantum crystals back to the extraction sites. It's the only way to rebuild the prison. 1-1. To people 1. 1-1-1. Dr. Zirion's telepathic mind was racing, processing data from the quantum field monitors. The human might be correct, she admitted reluctantly. If the quantum crystals were arranged in the same matrix pattern that originally contained the entity, you're talking about sending teams back down to the planet's surface, Director Vex said in horror. With that thing loose down there? It's suicide. Not teams, Marcus said quietly. Me. The Drakmori can guide me to the right locations. They know where each crystal needs to be placed. The command center erupted in protests. His father grabbed his arm. Absolutely not. You're just a boy. You have no training for this kind of operation. Dad, I'm the only one here who can communicate with them, Marcus said, gently pulling free. They're dying, trying to hold that thing back. Without their guidance, any rescue mission will fail. Another massive quake shook the station, and several more spatial cracks appeared. Through them, the quantum fire entity was becoming more visible, a vast intelligence of living flame that regarded their dimension with alien hunger. Its very presence was beginning to tear holes in space-time itself. Dr. Zirion stepped forward, her scientific mind overriding her species' prejudices. The quantum field mathematics support his proposal. But he'll need protection, something that can shield him from the entity's dimensional distortions. The mining mechs, suggested Lieutenant Torres, one of the human supervisors. They're hardened against quantum field fluctuations for deep crystal work. If we modify the shielding, do it, Director Vex ordered, his authority finally cutting through the chaos. Dr. Zirion, prepare a crystal deployment map based on the original geological surveys. Lieutenant Torres, get your best mech pilot to prep the equipment. I'll pilot it myself, Torres said. If the kid's crazy enough to try this, the least I can do is make sure he gets there alive. As the command crew rushed to prepare the desperate mission, Marcus stood before the main viewport, watching the Drakmori fight their impossible battle. Their song was beginning to falter. He could feel their life forces dimming as they poured everything they had into containing the quantum fire entity. Asterisk, we cannot hold much longer. Asterisk, the ancient voice whispered, now weak with exhaustion. Asterisk, the deep fire grows stronger with each moment it tastes freedom. If you are to rebuild the crystal prison, it must be soon. Asterisk. I understand, Marcus replied with his thoughts. Just hold on a little longer. I'm coming. The mining mech that Lieutenant Torres had prepared was a massive industrial unit, designed to operate in the most dangerous environments that frontier worlds could offer. Its quantum shielding had been boosted to maximum, and every available storage compartment was filled with the precious crystals that had been destined for the core worlds. Marcus climbed into the co-pilot's seat beside Torres, trying not to think about the fact that he'd never been in a mining mech before. The controls looked impossibly complex, but he wouldn't be piloting. His job was to serve as a living communication link between Torres and the Drakmori. You sure about this, kid? Torres asked as they launched from the station's mining bay. Because once we're down there with that thing, there's no guarantee we're coming back. Marcus felt the mental touch of dozens of Drakmori minds, their ancient wisdom flowing through him like a river of starlight. They were sharing their memories of the original crystal matrix, showing him exactly where each quantum crystal needed to be placed to rebuild the prison. I'm sure, he said, though his voice shook with more fear than confidence. "Just follow my directions, and trust that I know what I'm talking about." As their mining mech descended toward the burning surface of Kepler 442c, Marcus could feel the quantum fire entity's attention turning toward them. It had noticed the crystals they carried, recognized them as the tools of its imprisonment. The cosmic intelligence was ancient beyond measure, and it remembered the pain of being trapped. It would not be imprisoned again without a fight. The surface of Kepler 442c had become a nightmare of impossible physics. As Lieutenant Torres guided their mining mech through the twisted landscape, reality bent and warped around them like a fever dream. Gravity pulled in 3 directions at once. The sky bled colors that had no names, and everywhere, pillars of quantum fire erupted from the planet's wounded crust. Marcus gripped his seat restraints as the mech's sensors screamed warnings about dimensional instability. Through the connection he shared with the Drachmori, he could feel their growing desperation. Their ancient song was failing. Too many of their number had already burned out, their life force trying to contain the entity. "First crystal placement point is 3 kilometers ahead," Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The Drachmori say there's a stable approach through the canyon to our left." Torres grunted as he wrestled with controls that seemed to respond randomly in the distorted space-time. "Kid, I hope your dragon friends know what they're talking about, because my instruments are showing that canyon is full of spatial tears. Trust them," Marcus said simply. "They've been guarding this planet for longer than our entire civilization has existed." As they descended into the crystal canyon, Marcus felt a new presence touch his mind. Not one of the Drachmori this time, but something vast and alien and utterly furious. The quantum fire entity had noticed their mission and was focusing its attention on them like the gaze of an angry god. Asterisk small beings. Asterisk came a voice like the death of stars. Asterisk you seek to bind me again with crystal chains. I who devoured the architect's civilization. I who turned the Epsilon galaxy to ash. You will fail, and I will feast on your dimensional essence as I break free. Asterisk. The mech's quantum shielding flared as waves of destructive energy washed over them. Torres cursed as half their systems went offline. "Whatever that thing is, it doesn't want us here. It's afraid," Marcus realized suddenly. The insight came from the Drachmori's ancient memories. This entity, despite its cosmic power, had been imprisoned once before. It knew that the crystal matrix could contain it, and that knowledge carried a seed of genuine fear. "It's trying to stop us because it knows we can succeed." They reached the first crystal placement site just as the mech's engines began to fail. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the original installation point, a crystalline formation that had once anchored one corner of the quantum prison matrix. The formation was cracked and broken, its quantum resonance scattered. "How am I supposed to place a crystal in that mess?" Torres asked, staring at the writhing energy fields that surrounded the damaged anchor point. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, seeking the wisdom of the Drachmori. What he found was even more profound than he had expected. The dragon-like beings weren't just telepathic, they were quantum empaths, capable of sensing and manipulating the fundamental forces that held reality together. And somehow, his human mind was compatible with their ancient abilities in a way that no other species had ever achieved. Asterisk speaker of minds. Asterisk came the familiar ancient voice, now weak but still determined. Asterisk, we give you our remaining strength. Use our knowledge as your own. Become the bridge between crystal and consciousness. Asterisk. Marcus felt power flow through him, not his own power, but the collective will of an entire species that had spent millions of years learning to work with quantum forces. His awareness expanded beyond his physical body, allowing him to sense the broken quantum matrix as clearly as seeing a shattered window. "I can do it," he said quietly, then louder to Torres. "I can guide the crystal into position, but you'll need to get us closer. The quantum fields are unstable, but there's a pattern to the instability." "I can see it," Torres stared at him. "Kid, you're talking about navigating quantum field distortions that are scrambling our best sensors. That's impossible." "No," Marcus said, his voice carrying new confidence. "Just different. Trust me." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus guided Torres through an intricate dance of approach and retreat, timing their movements to the rhythm of quantum fluctuations that only he could perceive. When they finally reached the anchor point, the mech's manipulator arms placed the first crystal with surgical precision. The moment the crystal locked into position, the chaotic energy fields around them began to stabilize. The quantum prison matrix had one corner restored, and that small restoration sent ripples of harmony through local space-time, but it also drew the quantum fire entity's full attention. The cosmic intelligence erupted from the planet's core like a living volcano, its presence so alien and terrible that the mech's sensors simply shut down rather than try to process something that didn't fit into any known category of existence. Torres struggled to maintain control as gravity reversed itself, and the very air began to burn. Asterisk, you will not cage me again. Asterisk. The entity raged, its mental voice causing both humans to cry out in pain. Asterisk. I will tear through dimensions themselves to escape your primitive traps. Asterisk. Marcus felt the Drakmori's song reach a crescendo of desperate harmony as they threw everything they had left into containing the entity's rage. But he could sense their strength failing. Too many of their number had already burned themselves out. They couldn't hold the cosmic intelligence much longer. Second anchor point, Marcus shouted over the growing chaos. We have to reach the second point before their song fails completely. The next crystal placement was 3 kilometers away across terrain that now resembled an abstract painting more than a planetary surface. Space folded in on itself, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. But Marcus's enhanced perception, boosted by the Drakmori's ancient wisdom, allowed him to navigate paths that normal sensors couldn't detect. They placed the second crystal just as the first Drakmori fell silent forever. The ancient creature that had first spoken to Marcus collapsed to the planet's surface, its scales dimming to black as its life force burned away. But even in death, it had succeeded in its purpose with 2 corners of the quantum matrix restored. The entity's movement became noticeably restricted. Asterisk. 2 bindings hold. Asterisk. The remaining Drakmori sang in harmony, their mental voices growing faint. Asterisk. 4 more. And the deep fire sleeps again. But we are nearly spent. Speaker of minds. The final placements must be swift. Asterisk. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he sensed how few Drakmori voices remained in the collective song. An entire civilization was sacrificing itself to save the galaxy from a cosmic threat that most species didn't even know existed. And they were doing it for the same humans who had mocked and dismissed them as semi-intelligent animals. The third and fourth crystal placements went faster, as Marcus's quantum perception continued to grow stronger. The Drakmori's dying gift was transforming him into something unprecedented, a human who could sense and manipulate quantum fields with the same intuitive mastery that their species had developed over millions of years. But the 5th placement point was directly beneath the quantum fire entity's manifestation. There, Marcus pointed through the viewport at a pillar of cosmic flame that rose from the planet's core like a twisted tree. The final anchor point is right in the center of that thing. Torres looked at him like he'd suggested flying into a black hole. Kid, that's not a pillar of fire, that's the alien entity itself. Our shields won't last 10 seconds in direct contact with something like that. Oh, Marcus could feel the few remaining Drakmori preparing to make one final sacrifice. They were gathering their last reserves of life force for a desperate attempt to distract the entity long enough for the final crystal to be placed. It would cost them everything, their entire species would die so that the galaxy might live. No, Marcus said firmly. There's another way. He reached out with his enhanced consciousness, touching the quantum fire entity directly. The contact was like grasping a star with bare hands, alien intelligence so vast and terrible that it threatened to burn away his sanity. But hidden within the cosmic fury, Marcus sensed something unexpected: loneliness. The entity had existed for eons, in a universe where it was the only being of its kind. It had consumed civilizations not out of malice, but out of desperate hunger for connection with other forms of consciousness. Its cosmic nature made it incompatible with normal matter and energy, so every attempt at contact resulted in destruction. Asterisk, you're alone. Asterisk, Marcus projected with all the empathy he could muster. Asterisk, You've been alone since the universe was young, and you don't know how to connect with other beings without destroying them. Asterisk. The entity's rage faltered, replaced by confusion. Asterisk, you. Understand? But you are small things. Brief sparks in the cosmic void. How can tiny minds comprehend infinity? Asterisk. Asterisk. Because we've learned to bridge different types of consciousness. Asterisk, Marcus explained, thinking of his connection to the Drachmori. Asterisk. The dragons taught me that understanding doesn't require similarity, it requires compassion. Asterisk. For a moment, the quantum fire entity's terrible presence softened. In that instant of connection, Marcus saw the cosmic intelligence as it truly was not a destroyer, but a lost child of the universe who had never learned how to play gently with smaller beings. Asterisk, I hunger for contact. Asterisk, the entity admitted. Asterisk. But everything I touch turns to ash. I am poison to the small, warm lives that fill the void. Asterisk. Asterisk. Then learn control. Asterisk, Marcus suggested. Asterisk. Let us rebuild your prison not as a cage, but as a training ground. A place where you can learn to moderate your power, so that someday you might walk among the stars without burning them. Asterisk. The entity considered this with intelligence older than planets. During that moment of contemplation, its manifestation withdrew just enough for Taurus to pilot their damaged mech to the final anchor point. Marcus placed the last quantum crystal with shaking hands, his mind still reeling from direct contact with cosmic intelligence. As the crystal locked into position, the completed matrix sang with harmonic resonance that made reality itself seem more stable and beautiful. The quantum fire entity allowed itself to be drawn back into the crystalline prison, but now it was a willing participant rather than a trapped beast. Asterisk. I will learn. Asterisk. It promised. Asterisk. And perhaps, in time, I will walk among the small lights without extinguishing them. Asterisk. The surviving Drachmori, fewer than a dozen from what had once been hundreds, settled onto the restored crystal formations around the prison site. Their scales had dimmed to deep silver, showing the cost of their sacrifice, but their mental voices carried profound satisfaction. Asterisk. The deep fire sleeps again. Asterisk. The remaining ancient voice whispered in Marcus's mind. Asterisk. But more than that, it dreams of companionship rather than conquest. You have done something we never thought possible, speaker of minds. You have shown a cosmic force the meaning of compassion. Asterisk. Back aboard the mining station, the command crew watched in stunned silence as their sensors registered the restoration of local space-time stability. The dimensional cracks had sealed themselves, the quantum field readings had returned to normal, and most impossible of all, the entity that had threatened to consume the galaxy was now peacefully contained. Director Vex stood before the assembled staff, his scaled face showing emotions that his species rarely displayed in front of other races. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A human child has successfully negotiated a truce with a cosmic-level intelligence. Dr. Zirian stepped forward, her silver eyes wide with scientific wonder. The quantum field data suggests that young Marcus has developed telepathic abilities beyond anything we've previously recorded. His mental bridge with the Drachmori species represents a breakthrough in interspecies consciousness research. The boy didn't just solve our immediate crisis, added Lieutenant Torres, his voice filled with respect. He's opened up possibilities for communication with forms of life we never thought we could understand. Marcus sat quietly beside his father, feeling the weight of exhaustion and responsibility in equal measure. The Drachmori's gift had permanently changed him. He could still sense quantum fields and alien consciousness in ways that felt as natural as breathing. But more importantly, he had learned that understanding between different forms of intelligence was always possible, no matter how vast the differences seemed. Jake Chen put his arm around his son's shoulders, his weathered face showing pride and amazement. "So what happens now?" he asked. Director Vex answered, his voice carrying none of its former condescension. "Now, young Marcus receives the recognition he deserves. The Galactic Cooperative needs to know about these events. about humanity's unique capacity for consciousness bridging. I suspect this will change our species' standing in the galactic community considerably. Over the following weeks, as news of the Kepler 442c incident spread through the galactic cooperative, humanity's status began to transform. The species that had once been dismissed as mentally limited manual laborers was suddenly recognized for possessing a rare and valuable gift, the ability to form telepathic bridges with alien forms of consciousness. Research teams arrived from across the galaxy to study Marcus and the surviving Drachmori. They discovered that human neural architecture, with its unique balance of logic and emotion, was particularly suited to facilitating communication between species that had previously been unable to understand each other. Marcus became the first human enrolled in the Galactic Academy of Consciousness Studies, where his experiences with the Drachmori formed the foundation for an entirely new field of interspecies psychology. But he never forgot the lesson that the ancient dragons had taught him, that understanding required not just intellectual brilliance, but genuine compassion for minds that worked differently than his own. The quantum fire entity kept its promise, slowly learning to moderate its cosmic power during controlled interactions with the researchers who visited its crystalline home. Years later, it would become the first cosmic-level intelligence to achieve peaceful coexistence with smaller life forms, serving as an advisor on matters involving fundamental forces of the universe. And in the depths of space, other members of humanity began to discover their own talents for consciousness bridging. Some found they could communicate with hive-mind species. Others developed connections with artificial intelligences. A few even learned to interface with the vast, slow thoughts of living planets. The species that had been mocked as beast-talking primitives had become the galaxy's premier experts on understanding alien minds. They were no longer the newest and least respected members of the Galactic Cooperative. They were its most valuable bridges between different forms of consciousness. Marcus often stood in the observation deck of the research station that now orbited Kepler 442c, watching the Drachmori soar through the amber skies above their restored home. Their scales had regained their brilliant colors, and their mental voices sang with contentment rather than desperate warning. Asterisk, the bridge stands strong. Asterisk, the ancient voice would whisper in his thoughts. Asterisk, the small lights learn to understand the great fires, and the great fires learn gentleness. You have done well, speaker of minds. Asterisk, and in the quantum depths below, the cosmic entity dreamed peacefully, learning patience and control while it waited for the day when it might walk among the stars as a friend rather than a destroyer. The boy who had been dismissed as delusional had become the architect of a new age of understanding, and across the galaxy, whenever different forms of consciousness struggled to communicate, they would call for a human to build the bridge between minds. The age of human empathy had begun,